I'm so excited to talk to Darryll Stinson, a former Division I athlete turned transformational speaker, about the importance of mental health and wellness. Let me briefly introduce him before I bring him on. Darryll is a transformational speaker on a mission to impact the world by helping leaders grow their movements through personal development, storytelling, and public speaking. As a former Division I athlete who lost his career due to severe back injury, Daryl, founder of Second Chance Athletes, overcame multiple suicide attempts to become an international speaker, best-selling author, credentialed minister, award-winning philanthropist, and two times TEDx speaker, with one of his talks grossing more than 1.9 million views. Daryl's ultimate goal in life is to be known for how he loves and how he gives. When he's not working, Daryl enjoys rapping, reading, entertainment, music, sports, exploring nature, and spending time with his wife and four amazing children. So, hi, Daryl. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mental Health Break podcast.
Hey, I'm so excited. It's going to be so fun.
I am excited to have you and talk to you. You are so interesting to me because you have a very interesting story. So if you can tell me a little bit about, like, I introduced you a little bit about your background and being a Division I athlete and then getting injured and becoming suicidal, and now you're a motivational speaker. So can you speak a little bit about that and what your journey was before all of that, and then what happened to where you are today?
Yeah, of course. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm originally from Jackson, Michigan, and I grew up um, in accelerated learning classes, which meant that I was one of two Black students in an all white class. And long story short, I grew up with this internal confliction about was I too white to fit in with the Black crowd or too Black to fit in with the white crowd. And it created this insecurity around my identity, my voice, my intellect that really caused me to have an insecurity around speaking, around sharing my story, around being a vocal leader. I kind of hid all of that behind my athletic success, and I just told myself I would lead by example and had this dream to play in the NFL and to become the greatest athlete of all time. And I was on my way to do that, became a top 100 athlete in the US. And by the time I got to my freshman year in college at Central Michigan University, fire up chips, I ended up having a herniated disc in my back, and I did not get it checked out, and it was pinching on a nerve, and I was playing on this pinched nerve probably for several months until the point where I was having so much pain going on in my left leg that it was causing atrophy. Eventually, I ended up getting an MRI and saw that I was, you know, days, months, weeks away from having my left leg go paralyzed. So I ended up having emergency surgery. I got my MRI results back on Friday. I had the surgery on Sunday. The doctor came in on his off day to do it. And that was supposed to be it for me. Coaches said I had this golden ticket. I could come around sports whenever I'd like to. And I could, still have my education paid for. But since for me, sports was not what I did, it was who I was. I begged them to allow me to come back to play the game of football. And even after a severe back surgery, I came back and earned a starting position within 6 months of my surgery. And I did so at a cost to my health, my mental health, my emotional health, my social health, my spiritual health, because I got addicted to opioids. And, that led down this whole road where, suppressing my emotions, not communicating, not telling people that I was having this opioid addiction, started selling drugs throughout the state of Michigan to cover the cost of my healthcare expenses, and really was living this double life for 2 years. On one end, I was this, very extravagant, successful athlete. Our team ended up being ranked 23rd in the nation. And then behind closed doors, I was selling drugs and addicted to opioids. And that internal confliction came to an end when I was my senior year. I was taking so many opioids that they were thinning my blood to the point where every time I made contact on the field, my nose would bleed. And the coaches saw that something was clearly wrong and that I wasn't having allergies like I was telling them. And they kicked me off the team. And I got angry because I didn't know who I was outside of sports. And, there's people listening to this, watching this, who You may not know who you are outside of a relationship, outside of a job title, outside of a career path, and that creates some fear, some anxiety around your life and what your future could look like. And that's what I faced. And I'm happy to dive into any of the details around that. But ultimately, that led me into a psychiatric unit after multiple suicide attempts and trying to starve myself to death, going from 275 pounds to 219 pounds in 4 weeks. And it was there at the psychiatric unit that my life changed forever. I found my faith. I did my first journal entry. I saw my first counselor, met with my first therapist, did my first mindfulness exercise. And I started to learn that I could build my life from the inside out and not just the outside in. As an athlete, I had a system of success, but I did not have a system of self care. By the way, that's a great question to ask yourself is, do I have a system of success and a system of self-care for my life? And if not, how can I go about developing those? And so, the rest is history, came out and was highly successful in my career path and been able to do what I'm doing today. So that's kind of it for the story. And I'm happy to dive into any components of that resonated with you.
Wow, you talked about so many things that I try to talk about on this podcast because mental health and physical health are connected. But like you said, there are a lot of people that focus on the external successors, right? Like the grades or the cars or the wealth, but not really realizing what it takes to have happiness, I guess. It's an internal job. And you had to learn that the hard way because you were so driven on a goal, on an external goal.
Absolutely. And many people are, we are told that if we work hard and we set our mind to anything, that if we believe it, we can achieve it. And I believe a lot of that's true, but sometimes life just happens and has different plans for you. And sometimes things don't go our way. And sometimes failure is final. I could not come back and play the game, and I did everything in my power to do so, even after the second crash and burn. And that was where I had to really learn that sometimes life has different opportunities for you. And I didn't see it then, but I know it now that there's definitely uh, greater plans for our lives than we can even imagine if we just stay open minded. If we stay invested in ourselves and developing ourselves, we can create a life that we could have never imagined. And that's been the case for me. I at first was part of the suicidal ideations was that I didn't think that I would find anything that I loved as much as I love sports. It wasn't that I didn't think I could be successful at anything. I didn't think I would be fulfilled by anything other than sports. And some people feel like that. Like, what's going to fulfill me outside of this relationship? What's going to fulfill me outside of this dream job that I lost, you know, during the pandemic? And I felt that way. But if you stick with it and you invest in yourself and you work through, your internal resistance and your traumas and your pain, I mean, there's so much beauty and opportunity on the other side of that.
When I used to work in the schools, I saw so many kids, young kids that looked up to the athletes and said, that's what I want to do. I want to be a pro basketball player, pro football player, pro whatever, hockey player. And that's all they saw for themselves. Do you think that that's because your vision was so tunnel visioned, that that's what led to the suicidal thoughts, that you didn't see anything outside of those options? Was
Oh,
that
for sure. Yeah, I definitely had a singular identity. It wasn't holistic identity. I always say that we rise to the level that we are exposed to. And growing up, the only successful people I knew growing up in the inner city was, rappers and athletes. And so I figured I'd do both. I would rap and I would play sports. And I wasn't that good of a rapper, but I was a really good athlete. And so, yeah, when that got taken away from me, the rest of my skills were dormant or completely underdeveloped. And I didn't think that, I really had anything special to offer the world. But little did I know there was gifts and talents that I had yet to uncover or utilize and develop. And that's how I got to where I am today.
And that's what a lot of kids, I guess, don't understand is they think you're not believing in them when you ask them to have a plan B, right? It's you need to have plan B, C, and D sometimes because life doesn't always go exactly the way you plan. Obviously, you want to aim for you want if you want to be president, aim for being president. If you want to be a football player, aim for that. But also know that that might not happen. Life might have other plans for you, and pivoting is actually a good thing. And you learned that the hard way, that you were heading in a direction that you thought was going to bring you fulfillment, but now you're this motivational speaker. So can you speak to that now? Is how did you go from the psychiatric ward, the counseling, the journaling, the mindfulness to being who you are now, and who do you serve?
Yeah. I'll dive into that. I want to address something you said just in terms of people in the tunnel vision, because it comes up a lot around developing a plan B. And we mean well when we say that, and it's a great thing to get athletes to invest in. But one of the things that I reflected on in my journey as I rebuilt my life, and I started to have these conversations with other athletes who, they were living their current life as if it was second best to their former life as an athlete. Like literally, you talk to them about sports, and it's like, oh my gosh, oh wow, I'm so happy. Oh, remember this, remember that. And then you talk to them about their current life, and it's like, oh, just kind of working a job. And there was something off about that for me. And I noticed that, they were literally, thinking that it was all downhill from there and their glory days was behind them instead of in front of them. And so I asked myself the question, man, why didn't I listen to the advice that to put together a plan B, like you said? Why didn't I why didn't I listen to that advice when we had so many great speakers and resources at a world-class institution and a football program? And the reason was because I had a strong athletic identity. And what I've noticed is that the language of put together a plan B or backup plan for athletes goes against the psychology. If I can talk, it goes against the psychology of an elite athlete. We're taught not to entertain failure. We're taught not to entertain defeat. And so planning for plan B is saying plan for defeat. So it doesn't work for someone who's really invested in the way that they've been trained and groomed to be elite. And so the method that I outlined in my book, Who Am I After Sports, and I highly suggest anyone working with athletes, to get them to develop what we call a plan B, is to use the dream big, dream beyond method. Okay. It's very simple. I'll teach it to you in 60 seconds or less. You tell them to dream big, allow them to dream about their athletic career, get it all out there. They're going to be next Kobe Bryant, the next Michael Jordan, the next Danica Patrick, whatever it is. And then when they get that done, you say, now let's dream beyond. What do you want to do after that? And then they start talking about that. This way, they are prepared for that transition if it happens sooner than what they were wanting or anticipating. And so what this does is it works with their psychology. They're planning for success versus planning for failure. And I found that their participation rate in that exercise is far higher when we use Dream Big, Dream Beyond method than if we just encourage them to put together a plan B or plan C. Okay. So I wanted to make that quick point. I didn't know if you had any response to
I
that.
just want to say I love that. That is for somebody that's not an athlete, I wouldn't know to do that, but that is a
Yeah.
great idea because, like you said, their psychiatry or the way that they're wired isn't in line with Plan B, give
Right.
up the dream, right? It's like,
Yeah.
but this is dream, go for the direction that you're going, but what are you going to do afterwards? Do you think that Tom Brady just didn't have that into the equation and that he's still playing and then it's affecting his marriage and he's just not able to let it go?
I don't know until I talk to him, and I have yet to talk to Tom Brady. But I probably will at some point. My from the outside looking in, not really knowing the details of the situation, I just think that he's a guy that is committed to reaching his highest potential in all that he does. And it's a hard dynamic when you still feel like you got another year in you. You got another, a little bit of more gas in the tank. Nobody wants to trade in their car early if they don't have to. And so, yeah, is there some entanglement of the identity? Probably. But it could just be that, man, he feels like he can give it another year and he doesn't want to leave that stone unturned. Especially knowing like, how fast records get broken. And, he probably in the back of his mind is thinking like, man, if I play another year, win another Super Bowl, like I just set the bar higher for the next person and maybe I'll be a legend forever, even though he still will be, but for longer by setting the bar a little bit higher. So every person who's really like, Mamba mentality or plays at the level that Tom Brady plays at, thinks that way. So that would be my guess of why he's having some trouble giving it up.
Well, he's at the top of his game, but there are people that get stuck in the high school fame era, right? Like they were the quarterback and the
Yeah.
class president or prince or whatever
Oh
those
yeah.
things are in high school, and they can never get out of that. Like you said, they talk about the good old days as if that was it, and
Yeah.
then nothing compares to that afterwards. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. It's like they don't have that vision of, I need to develop, I need to continue to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's challenging and it's tough. And I get it, right? Like I put in, work, hours, blood, sweat, tears, and to start
Mhm.
from scratch as a beginner in something was terrible. I'm like, I'm a top 1% in an industry. Like imagine most people don't make it to the top 1% of anything. And here I am, top 1% athlete. And now I got to start being like nobody, and it was so challenging to be a beginner at something. I was so used to dominating and being the best that I was like, oh, I don't know how to send a professional email. Like, how embarrassing is that when people have been doing that for years as I started in the workforce? And so I had to overcome the pride and the ego to really start to change my life.
Well, that's a huge dream to be shattered, right? I mean, you wanted to be in the NFL and live that dream. So let's go back to, how did you go from that psychiatric ward,
Yeah.
and what helped you become who you are now and reaching the level of people? And who are you reaching right now? Who are you working with besides?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I left the psychiatric care facility thinking is that there has to be something out there for me. I was fortunate enough to survive my suicide attempts, and I felt like that was for a divine purpose. And so I wanted to figure out why I was here on this planet. I wanted to figure out what my purpose was. And so I got hungry and desperate to figure out what that was. And I studied every major world religion. I invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into leadership experiences, into doing different spiritual experiences, just trying to really find my purpose, and came to the point where I felt like I had a good understanding of what that purpose was. And I actually put it as a chapter in my book and wrote it and made a course about it, and you know honed it down to the top 22 questions that I learned during that time period, which was over the course of 5 years, of how to find one's highest purpose in life. And so, based upon all the different, religions and modalities that I invested in. And so once I had a great sense of purpose, so I would say that was part of what started to pull my life forward, was this desire to figure out what my purpose was and to continue to invest in experiences that refined that and brought more of that out of me. Okay. The other thing that I did is I got a mentor and I started reading. Prior to my awakening experience in the psychiatric unit, I was not a reader. I didn't do any personal development. I just played sports, and so I started to invest in myself. And I'll never forget the first thing that I said out of my mouth that impressed someone that came out of a book that I read. I was like, "Ooh, I like that. They think I'm brilliant." And I stole it. So I started to do it more, and I lived in the library and I read everything that I could. I think I heard this. I don't know who it was that said this, but this may help someone. Is I heard someone say that if you read a book a month on a given subject, so let's call it mathematics, you were to read a book per month on mathematics, you would be an expert in 3 years. And so I kind of took that as my true north of like, I'm just going to read a book per month on this. And I studied leadership and I studied public speaking. And sure enough, here I come becoming an expert because the average person doesn't put that much time in a given particular area. So I started to invest in myself through that. And then I increased that investment. I went from just reading books and listening to podcasts to investing in high ticket coaches, high value experiences, obviously getting around the right people. And once I started to really see my skill set around speaking and storytelling and helping other people do the same, I just went for it, invested in that, wrote a best-selling book, started to speak on more stages, did a TEDx talk, and started to coach other people through. So you asked me about what do I do today? Is I help leaders turn their messages into movements through booking TEDx talks and speaking engagements. I believe the fastest way to grow any business is through public speaking. because a person gets to know you and feel you and sense you and hear your heart, and that allows them to build trust with you. And when people trust you, they'll buy from you, you know? And so it's been an amazing experience to really evolve from being a person who just shares my story to being a person who's investing in other stories that are beyond my own perspective and experience, and see the ripple effect of that. So, uh, we can do a whole master class on it, but I want to pause and see if you have any questions or want to dive into any specific practices.
Well, given that we are talking about mental health, I'm really curious as to, can you describe the mindset or what was going on for you during your darkest time? And then what are some strategies besides the therapy and the journaling and the mindfulness that really helped you? And you said you found faith and you try to
Yep.
apply and you read. Can you just focus on like that moment and how
Yeah.
dark life looked, right? Was it just the opiate addiction that caused the suicide attempts, or was it just the mindset and the negative
Oh, so much.
darkness?
It was so many layers.
Well, it's different
um,
for everyone, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so part of it was, obviously the opioid addiction, the loss of the dream. The other thing is I was dating a girl for 4.5 years who I intended on marrying. I was
Mhm.
completely in love with her. We, did all the cute stuff, couples are supposed to do, carve my last name next to her first name. We used to stay up on the phone and all night and sleep on the phone so that we can hear each other breathe. Like it was like that type of stuff. And so when I got injured and was no longer going to the NFL, she left me and got engaged to another man, which
Oh.
validated this insecurity that I have from a little boy, that who I was authentically wasn't enough to be liked or loved by other people. And so there was just layers of that. And then when I no longer was playing, my phone wasn't ringing as much. I
Mhm.
wasn't in front of mainstream media. My teammates and coaches weren't asking me how I was doing anymore. And so I just felt like I was worthless. So all of that was layered onto that, plus the fact that I was raised to not communicate my emotions. You know,
Mhm.
this is popular and common in a lot of minority families, is that the crybabies is not something we respect. Having street cred, these types of things create this lifestyle of suppression where I don't really talk about my true emotions, but I suppress. And I always tell people that whatever you don't express, you suppress. So I had tons of suppressed emotions, tons of suppressed trauma, plus all these other things going on, and that was the culmination of the suicide attempt. And so post that experience, and I know you kind of said, besides journaling, besides mindfulness, besides counseling, and I'm like, no, not
Was
besides.
there-
Like those are really important things, and it matters how you do it. Okay. So let's take journaling for instance. Um, I thought that journaling meant that I had to have a diary, that I needed to spill out all of my problems, all my guts, be too emotional. And I was taught that as a man that, I'm not an emotional person, quote unquote. And so that was a practice for me. Okay. To start to communicate my emotions, I would write down what happened during my day. I would write down how I felt about what happened. And I would write down what could that mean.
So you reflected on the lesson.
Reflected. Okay.
Mhm.
And what that started to do is to develop a practice of awareness
Mhm.
around how I felt in the moment versus what actually happened in reflection. And I started to see that a lot of times our feelings, although they are always real, they are not always right.
Right.
And how many times my feelings were a projection of a past pain and insecurity and impatience, you name it. And it really started to help me to choose differently in the moment, to breathe when I would feel a spike of emotion, and to consciously choose differently. So it was a developing practice. The first year I had no language for that. The next year I got a little bit better. The more that I did it, the better I got. Okay. Consistency is so important. Seeing a counselor, I didn't have great experiences starting out. I've actually had people ask me for my money back. I had people, say harmful things in my counseling session. I hope that never happens to
Mhm.
anyone, but I do always reference that because I tell people that the journey to find a good counselor is sometimes challenging for people.
Mhm.
So I encourage them to stick with it because it's so healthy to get that outside perspective. Okay. One of the things that my counselor enabled me to do, that's another discipline, is use affirmations and declarations. And I'll tell you the moment, because I always love this story, is she's this short, 5 foot white lady. Here I am, this 6'5", 270 pound, former athlete. And I'm complaining and talking about life and problems and stuff. Up until this point, I hadn't used positive affirmations, hadn't used declarations. And she said, hey, suggested you should start, doing some of this. Maybe say, I am enough, I am worthy. And I literally told her in the session, I was like, I'm not brainwashing myself with negativity. I'm not about to do that. And then she said to me, Daryl, we've been talking for 45 minutes. You've said nothing but negative things. You're already brainwashing yourself with negativity. I'm just trying to help you switch the tape.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
You don't realize how much that automatic programming kicks in.
Oh my gosh. I was so unconscious to it. And it was a game changer for me. And that's when I started to do it. And one of the practices, and I challenge all people, but especially type A personalities, sometimes most men who are really have a resistance to this. I kind of play towards that. And I will say, I've been known to do this in front of a live audience who resist the mental health thing because they feel it's softer. It doesn't really contribute to productivity, which it does, by the way. I say, if you really want to be tough, if you really want to be a man, I dare you to get a mirror, look yourself in the mirror, and to repeat positive affirmations about yourself. I am worthy
Mirror
of
exercise
love.
is very difficult.
Oh, it's so different because you get to see all of the ways that you are lying to yourself and how much your internal beliefs do not match up what you think you believe. And the amount of people who think that I am confident, I have this high esteem, but when they do that mirror exercise, they see themselves look off and they can't look themselves straight in the eye because they're full of shame and regret and unforgiveness. It's such a powerful mirror for people. And so I definitely encourage doing it, not so you can see where you're not at yet, but so that you can know where you're starting at, so you can begin to grow from there and build yourself up versus living with this suppressed emotion of low confidence and unforgiveness and all the things that could be hidden inside of you. And so that's a powerful practice to begin to do mirror exercises.
Well, also the first, I tell people to do this, especially for women, just looking in a mirror and saying, I am beautiful. For the first probably 20 days, they're probably going to cringe every time they look in the mirror and say that. Because this little guy in your head, this little monster is going to say, no, you're not. There's nothing beautiful about you. There's nothing that you like. Or whatever, the automatic tape starts coming on, right? But
Right.
after doing it for several weeks and just sticking with it, even if you don't believe it yet, by the 30th day, your brain be like, yeah, you are beautiful, or you are powerful. You are, like, you're changing that programming, but it
Right.
doesn't work the first time. It takes, they say, an average of 60 times, but I'm saying give it a 30-day experiment at least. Try it and see how it goes.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And that consistency, I can't understate it. It's so important. A lot of people say, I tried to journal, I tried to meditate, I tried
Once.
medication, I tried all these things. And it's like, for how long? Oh, I tried it. I tried meditation twice. I fell asleep both times.
Yeah.
It didn't work for me. And I'm like, okay, if you tried to eat healthy for 2 days, you think it's going to fix your problem? No. And so stick with it, be consistent, even if it's like, again, 5 minutes a day beats 2 hours on a Saturday, any day of the week. Consistency beats intensity every single time. And so stay consistent in that practice and allow yourself to experience, the residual effect of the consistency. Mirror exercise, journaling, counseling. Another powerful practice that I do is mindfulness. Two ways, two exercises I will give people. One you probably always hear, one you may not have heard. Uh, Breathing is so important. In your nose for a 6 count, out your mouth like you're spitting out through a straw for 6 seconds. Helps reset the nervous system, bring your body back to a sense of safety where you can be able to really see life for what it is. Okay.
Right, because we're not breathing deeply when we're scared. When
We're
we're
not breathing.
feeling safe, we're breathing deeply, and that sends a signal
Absolutely.
to your brain.
Absolutely. And it's a great exercise to develop an awareness around your breath in general. Most times when we are in fear, we shorten our breath. We hold on. And if we are in fight, flight, or freeze, our breathing patterns change. And a lot of times we are not our best selves when we're not breathing properly. And so, one of the good things to pay attention to, even if you're not in a crisis mental health state, and you just want a better quality of life, is start to pay attention to your breath. Like, I'm at a great, stable mental health state, but I've been really working on paying closer attention to my breathing because it makes me a more conscious speaker. When I'm talking to my wife and I'm breathing, I am nicer. And it helps with the quality of the relationship. So breathing is one. Another mindfulness exercise, the one that I said you may not know, is to brush your teeth without thinking about anything other than brushing your teeth.
Mm.
Okay. It was one of it was actually well, other than psychiatric facility, it was my first mindfulness exercise, was that I had to brush my teeth while only focusing on the teeth that I was brushing. And the amount of times I wanted to grab the cell phone, think about something else, plan out my day, solve a problem in my mind, and I was distracted from the current moment. That was harmful for me. It was how I would get in pattern. A lot of times when people do things that they regret, outburst in anger, a moment that they just wish they could take away, they always use this phrase of, "Oh my gosh, what was I thinking?" And most times it's that they weren't, because they weren't being mindful at all. And so mindfulness exercises helps you to do that. Okay. And then I just got to sow the seed for meditation in there, because I think that's the most powerful one when it comes to mindfulness, is to be able to meditate. And I love this definition that I heard of meditation. I used to go with stillness, but I love that it is paying undistractable attention to reality.
Wow.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Paying undistractable attention to reality.
Because we're everywhere but reality usually, right? We're in our heads, we're in the past, we're in the future, we're not thinking about what's happening right this second. And this is why those shows on Netflix, like they're called brain games, I guess, where people can easily distract us because we miss so much in life because we're not paying attention to our environment, we're not fully present. And so learning how to meditate is really important. But unfortunately, a lot of people associate that with religion. And so they stay away from it instead of saying, no, it's just a time to get still, just to calm down. And there
Mhm.
are other things, like I have a hard time just laying still for a long time. So doing something like a moving meditation, like Qigong, is really helpful as well,
Mm,
because I'm just
yes.
focusing on my breath through movement, or yoga,
Yes.
whatever people like to do.
Yes, I love that. Love that. So, so good. But pick something, okay, and start to begin to do it consistently. There's so much research around how, mental health challenges affect productivity and performance. And so it's not just one of those things where we're trying to go from a crisis state to normal or safety. It's also, how do I move my life forward? And we see that even elite athletes now who are mentally well are incorporating great mental health practices to be able to enhance their performance. They're journaling, they're meditating, they're doing mindfulness exercise, and it's making them a greater quality human being. So just want to incentivize you to do that, whether you're in crisis or whether you are at a healthy state. Your mental health, your self-care is so important.
What do you say to people that say, I don't have time to do any of that?
We make time for the things we value.
But we like, or I don't have rituals, or I don't have time for rituals. Like they do have rituals, right? It's like scrolling on Instagram and TikTok for hours is part of their ritual. It's just not effective use. And a lot of people think, well, I don't have time to focus on meditation or journaling, but not realize, like you said, they can be much more productive and
Yeah.
enhance their creativity and their productivity
Yeah.
when they
That's what
do.
I tell them. Yeah, they don't have time. It's usually that they haven't equated a high enough value. And that's what I mean. You make time for the things you value. So if I don't have time to implement self-care, if I don't have time to see a counselor, if I don't have time to journal, if I don't have time to do these things, then it's because I have placed a low value on those practices, which in a lot of cases, deep breath, a lot of cases because they don't value themselves.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
because that is
But then
taking
they
time
all
for you.
come like these are the kind of people that I see in therapy, and that their life is falling apart, but they haven't taken the time to do. It's like fix me, give me a
Mhm,
pill, fix me. But they've realized taking a pill isn't going to do it. If a
mhm.
pill could easily fix our lives, we'd all be on it, right? But
Right, right.
we have to do the work. We have to prioritize
Absolutely.
our mental health. We have to take the time to do what's right for our mind and our body.
I so agree. I so agree.
Mhm.
And I really would look at that. Sometimes I'll play to the ego and I tell people that knowing a thing isn't the same thing as doing a thing.
Mhm.
And everyone wants to be right. And so I'll do this. I've got a speaking engagement tomorrow. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. But I'll say, hey, how many of you know that self care is important, or you believe that self care is important? Everybody hands goes up. How many of you know certain self care practices you could do to have a better quality health? You know, everybody's hand go up. Okay, how many of you do them? Phew. Okay, knowing a thing isn't the same thing as doing a thing. A lot of times we think, oh, I know. Self care is important. Oh, I know. Counseling is important. Oh, I know. Journaling is important. Oh, I know. But in reality, we don't know. Okay, we only know in theory, but not in practice.
Mhm.
You can have a PhD in bicycling, know how the gears work, know how all the handlebars fit together, know how to break down all the mechanics of it. But if you never rode a bike and you get on the bike for the first time, you're probably going to fall.
Mhm.
Okay. Because knowing a thing, it's not the same thing as doing it. And there is an awareness and an experience that happens in the act of practicing that is not available outside of it. I don't care how much you study it, you don't know what it's like to tilt to a 20-degree angle on a bike and have to balance your internal, abs and all the things because you haven't done it yet. And it's the same thing when you're in these mental health practices is you don't really know how much they benefit you until you're in them. Right?
Mhm.
Like when I was talking to people about meditation, I try to have all these different ways to explain it to them. Talk about the speed of thought. I mentioned earlier about how many people have this emotional spike. They do something they do something they regret, and then they say, "Oh man, what was I thinking?" One of the things that can help you make better choices and decisions in real time is learning how to become more aware of the speed of thought through meditation. Because in meditation, if you sit and you breathe slowly, you're gonna have a ton of thoughts that come up. It's gonna be like, "Oh, work, do this, answer the phone, blah, 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 I gotta pee." It's like all this stuff comes up, and then you just breathe and you realize something very powerful. Sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful. That I can have these thoughts come through my mind, but I don't have to follow the rabbit trail.
Mhm.
Wow, that's such an empowering thing. In anyone who's not in an active practice of doing it will not really be able to understand until they do it. And they're like, oh, whoa, I never realized how much I was allowing my thoughts to run my life versus being empowered consciously to choose my thoughts. Okay. And I say this in full respect to mental illness and full respect to things that are outside of our control. Okay. And then that's a whole conversation.
Right. Do you find that it's difficult to convince men or communities of color to embrace this way of doing things, this way of being mindful and being aware and actually investing in your mental health and actually working on yourself? Because I feel like minority cultures are not taught to do that. It's a very selfish thing, or I should say selfish in quotes. It's a selfish thing to do because we're very community oriented, right? We're not an individualistic society necessarily. So what has been your experience?
Real men don't cry.
Yeah.
Men aren't emotional. Not being an emotional person is a learned behavior.
Mhm.
Okay. And the way that I spoke like 2 weeks ago to a group of 900 men, and I was talking to them about all this stuff, and they were looking at me like I was so weak and soft and whatever. I couldn't crack the hard emotional shell they had on. Then I told them this. I said, "Hey, all right, all of you are an emotional person, and I have one thing to prove it. It's called your mother. Your mother will vouch for me and tell you that you are an emotional person. You don't believe me. The moment you came out the womb, the first thing you did was and
Yeah.
I say that and they laugh because they get it. I learned to be unemotional because it wasn't safe, it wasn't accepted, it wasn't socially approved. And so I taught myself to suppress my emotions.
But
You
we're
know,
perpetuating things that worked for a community at a time, or maybe
mhm,
it still does, but we're not recognizing that maybe in this moment it doesn't have to, right?
it
Like
doesn't have
learning
to.
how to protect yourself in those times and not another.
It served you in maybe one season. It may have served us well as African Americans in slavery to
Mhm.
suppress our emotions, to shut up, to listen, to don't speak up. But it sure ain't serving us now.
Right.
It's the thing that is causing the violence in our communities. It's the things that are causing the suicide rates to rise and the depression rates and the
Mhm.
drug abuse and addiction rates because we have a society of people who don't want to feel anything. They just want to numb themselves to the current reality and hope that life somehow gets better on its own or that they just are able to function through numbing the pain.
Or
But
the
the
only emotion that's acceptable is anger.
Oh, don't. Yeah, I have a whole story. I'll tell it just since you brought it up. Is because I love story. I believe in the power of it. What I love about story is that you get to see multiple things when you tell a story versus if you share a principle, you just get the one principle. So
Mhm.
yeah, the only anger that or only emotion that was acceptable that in my mind was anger. And so when I early the first 2-3 years of my marriage, that's the only thing that I communicated to my wife was anger. So when we had a disagreement, it was always yeah, leave the house, slam the door, but outburst of anger. And as I started to learn how toxic that was, and how the emotion that I was really feeling was not one of anger, it
Mhm.
was one of pain or sadness or whatever it was. And so, one of the things that my counselor, speaking of counseling, helped and empowered me to do and challenged me to do was to communicate my actual emotions. And I literally had to get one of those like emotional
The
word
wheels.
vocabulary to even like know what the other options were.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the first time me and my wife got in a heated disagreement, aka an argument. And instead of me having an outburst in anger, I said, "You know what, sweetie? What you said the other day, hold on, can't say it. Hold on. Hurt my feelings."
Yeah.
If you sit in a room full of men, they're like, "Oh, you softy, your feelings get hurt." Like, yeah, my feelings get hurt. And
Yeah.
that is a way healthier thing to say than, "Who are you talking to me like this?
How dare you? Yeah.
I dare you," And man, if we could start to do that, it's like a breath of fresh air would wash over our communities, and we would actually be able to feel um, our real authentic emotions, which produce the very things that we actually want. The behavior change that we desire from someone through anger, which we are communicate, actually comes a lot faster through love and compassion and joy and bliss and connectedness than it does through anger and bossiness.
Right. Well,
So
it's like raising kids too. You get more out of them when you have a good connection with them and there's positive reinforcement instead of punishment and
absolutely,
consequences.
absolutely.
And I know culturally for me, I had to learn, like when I first learned that anger is a mask for sadness and
Mhm.
feeling hurt and just despair. When I saw it as a mask, I was like, wow, I'm wearing this anger as a mask when I'm really feeling all this other stuff underneath. And these
Yeah,
are things that we have to learn. Kind of like you said, we're all emotional. We all have anger, we have sadness, but we learn how to put on masks. And
nice.
once we learn how to take those masks off and be vulnerable, we realize
Mhm.
we can have richer connections, richer discussions and dialogue, more awareness. It's just a better life.
I so agree with you. I so agree with you. And the other thing that's huge, and I'm almost scared to bring it up because I know how controversial it can be, is food and nutrition.
I was going to bring
And
that up too.
in the minority community, I mean, soul food is worshipped like a golden calf.
Mm.
And I'll never forget talking to one of my grandmothers, who I love dearly, and saying that I didn't want what I normally get for Thanksgiving with the fried food and the greasiness and all the things that sound good, tasted good for years. But the more conscious I became, the more I started to recognize how our nutrition impacts our mental health, the more I started to make smarter choices. And I didn't want to make those choices. And oh my gosh, you would have thought I crucified Jesus. You would have thought that I shot the
Or
president.
spit in their food.
Oh my gosh, highly offended. I dare you. This is the food. What are you trying to say? This food was good enough to raise you. It's not good enough anymore. And it's
Oh,
like, no, it was good enough to raise me. And now I'm grown and it's not good for me to eat it now, And oh my gosh, I just think like when you look into the research of how our food affects our mood, oh, it's so staggering to know that we could literally have a different experience mentally and socially if we would just eat healthier. And I'm not talking about perfection, but most of the time. Can we do it 51% of the time? Can we just add more natural vegetables? Can we drink more water? Like these are things to think about. Can we not fry everything?
mm, yeah.
Because the stuff that does to our body is terrible. And minority culture, man, wake up, please. Become more conscious of what we're eating and stop worshiping a tradition that's killing us.
It's killing us mentally and physically. And a lot of people are going to have a lot of issues down the road because nowadays they're saying diabetes is Alzheimer's is the type
Hereditary.
3 diabetes.
Mhm.
There's a lot of inflammation causing depression and anxiety for people. And it all goes down to our gut and what we're putting in it.
Oh my gosh, so much. And we just stuff it in and numb it and numb it and numb it and numb it. I tell you what, if people were to go on a 30-day fast where they eat fruits, vegetables, and water, it'll reset their body so powerfully. I don't think that they would go back. I don't think that they would go back. I'm actually on that journey. I'm on a journey to become vegan myself. It's a very challenging journey because as a football player, I had to gain a pound per week as a freshman, 1 pound per week. And I lived on campus, in the dorms, and the closest restaurant to me was McDonald's. So I used to eat, don't vomit. I used to eat $12 to $15 worth of McDonald's per meal. And I would
Wow.
eat that twice a day for lunch and for dinner. And then for breakfast, I would eat at the dorms and eat whatever they had, like a bunch of it. And so, ugh,
You saw Supersize Me, right? Isn't that what he did? Just ate at McDonald's.
oh my gosh. Oh, it's terrible. And I gained the weight and I, burned up, but oh, my organs, my intestines, my heart, my lungs. I mean, just everything, just
Well,
terrible. So,
I didn't know that I became actually a vegetarian after this, but when I was a teenager, I was eating nothing but fast food, burgers and fries and shakes and Coke and just drinking soda, tons of soda. I had a lot
mhm.
of anxiety. I had anger issues. My skin was completely a mess, but I had no connection. Nobody was at that time talking about the connection between food and mood. And
Mhm.
then something happened. I read this book, Diet for a New America, and then I became a vegetarian,
Mhm.
um, and was a bad vegetarian. I ate nothing but carbs and sugar. Didn't really know how to balance out
That's
my
one
diet.
depends on.
And so that led to a hormonal imbalance and insulin
Oh, geez.
resistance and to all these issues. And we don't contribute those things. It's like, it's very difficult to connect cigarette smoking and lung disease, right? There's no direct connection, at least, because we haven't done that kind of study. But there
Mhm.
is a direct connection between food and mood. It definitely affects us, and we need to be more conscious of it. And I know, like you said, it's controversial. People don't want to get rid of their favorites, but if they want better mental and physical health, they have to make that investment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I get it. It's tough. It's easier said than done, but I'm telling you, your life is worth it. Um, and I one of the things that is coming up for me right now is I'm thinking about a family member that I had who literally lost 2 fingers and a leg from diabetes and just
Oh,
never changed his diet. And I don't understand what it's going to take for us to make the changes that are best for us. Like, even in crisis, we're so conditioned and so afraid to change that we'll just keep doing stuff that is so harmful to us. And I'm just begging you, like, please don't wait for a crisis to make smarter choices. Don't wait till you are faced with a bad diagnosis at a, from your doctor to where you start eating healthier. Don't wait till you're in a real bout of depression that you can't even feel like you want to get out of bed in the morning to where you decide that I'm going to start doing something about my mental health. Don't wait till you lose a friend or a loved one till you start journaling and processing and seeing a counselor about your trauma and your pain. Do it now just because it's good for you.
Yeah.
And
Don't be overwhelmed. Don't make changes overnight. I mean, do one thing at a time, like you said. Why can't you just add more vegetables and eat more salads, and then slowly go towards that? Because there is that addiction component. Food is very addicting, and a lot of people freak out. Like I know when I was addicted to my carbs, when people were like, "Well, you're eating too many carbs. You need to cut that out." It's like, but that's all I eat. I'm a vegetarian. What else am I supposed to eat? I would freak out about it. And so I can totally understand that, but it's definitely worth it to start eating differently and adding the foods that are actually good for your brain and good for your body.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
So tell us a little bit about this book that you've written.
Yeah, who am I after sports? So I mentioned earlier that I was having a conversations with a lot of former athletes, and I saw that they were living their current life as if it was second best to their former life as an athlete. And that didn't sit right with me. I was like, man, how did I get to this place where I wouldn't trade my current life for my life as an athlete? I was living the opposite. My best days were ahead, and their best days were behind. And so I started to look in retrospect of like, I mean, how did I get here? And what I discovered that there was five specific phases that I went through in order to really fall in love with my life and to build a productive, happy, healthy life. Not a perfect life, but a productive, happy, healthy life. And I outlined that in the book, which I call the five phases of transition. And so in Who Am I After Sports, I open with the story of me in the psychiatric unit and how I got there and that experience. And then I walk people through the five phases of transition, which I've been told by corporate executives, by former military personnel that although the stories that I share is around athlete identity, the principles are transferable to anyone in a season of transition. Okay. The phases is accept, believe, discover, pursue, persist. Say it again for the note takers. Accept, believe, discover, pursue, persist. You have to accept it. When we talk about the five stages of grief, there comes to a point of acceptance. What I believe is that you can get there faster without having to go through the five stages of grief. Okay. The second, accept, believe. You have to believe in a better future. This is all about developing that belief through affirmations, through declarations, through life visioning. Okay. Discover. Once you believe that there's a better future, you have to figure out what that better future is for you. That's where I share my 22 questions. I told you that I learned from, studying major world religions and investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into my own education and spiritual development. Discover your purpose. So accept, believe, discover, pursue. You got to go after it. Now we're talking about time management, energy management, time maximizing strategies, goal setting, all these things. How do you actually achieve the thing and produce it and achieve at a high level? Okay. Accept, believe, discover, pursue. And then persistence is all about resilience. How can you build systems in your life so that you can keep going when the going gets tough? And so that's what the book is about. And there's a bonus chapter called What Really Happened, where I uh, let you figure out what really happened and the secret that I'm hiding in the last chapter. But uh, there's a little teaser for you.
Ooh, sounds exciting. So is the book available on Amazon?
Everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what advice would you have to young Daryl, the Daryl before he got injured? What advice would you have, knowing what you know now about everything you've gone through?
I would tell the old Daryl, there is so much more to you than what you see. I know you think that you're just an athlete and that's all you care about right now in this moment, but your ability to connect with people, your ability to share vulnerably, your energy that you have and your infectious personality is far more valuable than your skill to run fast and jump high. And I think you should invest in those gifts and those talents and nurture them because they're going to take you to places you never expected.
Wow, that was beautiful. I think all kids need to know that they can be well rounded, right? It's just not one thing. Try different things. That's what I loved about going to community college when I was younger. I tried everything. I tried all different subjects. I tried all these different classes just to figure out, who am I? What do I really want to do? Am I doing this because I want to do it, or do I want to do this to please somebody else, my parents, whoever? And really finding that path was important to me. And I think every kid needs to be given that opportunity.
I so agree. And you brought up kids, and I started to think about myself in like elementary school because I actually had some of my first suicidal thoughts that at that age.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I just thought so because I didn't fit in. Sports really was the only thing that made me popular, and people liked me because of my gift, but they didn't like me because of me. And I always tell people, make sure you love people for them, not just for their gift, and surround yourself with people who love you for you, not just your gift. And so I had a lot of that growing up, and I was like, man, I wouldn't have listened to anything profound. I had this, like all the stuff I just said, I wanted to listen to that when I was in elementary school. I was like a knucklehead. And so what I did is I actually developed a rap, and it's called "We All Need Hope." And my daughter, who was 5 at the time, sung the chorus, and I rapped the verse. And it's available for free on all listening platforms. It's called "We All Need Hope." And the first verse goes like this: hold on to your faith, don't let nobody shake it. And if they talk about your clothes, don't even let it phase you, because I was broke. If they talk about your looks, don't even pay attention. They talked about my gap. You ain't got to listen. They entitled to their own opinion. Here's what I discovered: it's the people who talk bad about everybody else. They do it to feel better about themselves. So just be you and don't you worry about a thing. Them storms gonna come, but dance in the rain. Keep your head up because life will try to push you down. Every smile is just a frown turned upside down. So count your blessings. You got the power to turn every loss into a lesson. So quit stressing, because bad days don't mean that you got a bad life, and sad days don't mean that you got a sad life. I said bad days don't mean that you got a bad life, because you still got hope. And then my daughter comes on and say, we all need hope. And then that's the song. And so that's what I would say to the elementary version of Daryl.
That was wonderful. Wow. Yeah, I love it. And in our culture, having a gap in your teeth means that you're going to be very wealthy.
Does it really?
It
I'm
does.
coming to your culture.
I know my sister got braces. I'm like, why would you do that? You had a gap. That was.
So quick story. Okay. So I am teaching with a health practitioner. Her name's Yuandi also. She works for the government now, but she at the time she was doing her own business with healthcare. And I was training on the story side, and she was training on like, all the research and the, terms and all the stuff. And so she heard me tell the story about how when I was a kid, I was doing my homework in class and I felt something hit me in my head. And I looked up and all the students were laughing because they were trying to kick a paper football through the gap in my teeth.
Oh,
And oh yeah, big time. So I developed this insecurity. I wouldn't smile, I didn't like my gap, blah, blah, blah. Well, I told her that story. She cuts me off and she says, "Are you serious?" She's from Nigeria. She said, "In our culture, the width of your gap determines the tribe that you're from. And in some cases, like, the wider the gap, the better the tribe and the more esteem you'd have."
wow.
And it taught me a powerful lesson. And is the reason why I told this story. Because sometimes what's rejected in one culture is accepted in another.
Exactly.
Sometimes you're rejected at work, but you'd be accepted in another work setting. Sometimes you're rejected at the school you attend, but you would be accepted in another thing. So never let someone's rejection of you make you change who you really are, because there is another group who would accept all of who you are.
And
And it taught me a
define you.
powerful lesson.
Well, it's like Cindy Crawford's mole, right? When she was starting out as a model, everybody kept saying, you got to get rid of that mole. But now what do we know her as? We know her because of that mole, and that mole made her famous, and it's actually beautiful, and it's called a beauty mark for a reason, but some people don't like it.
Yeah,
And
I
we
get it.
define ourselves based on their limited vision.
Yeah. So there we go. So I'm keeping the gap, baby. Let's go.
Keep that gap. That's right. Well, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you for everything that you're doing. I hope that our listeners took some nuggets away and just find one thing that they can implement in their life. You know, we overestimate what we can do in a day, and we underestimate what we can do in a lifetime of consistency. So if you start today and you're consistent tomorrow, you'll be surprised where your life can take you.
Perfect ending. Thank you.